like you're beating a pan. A show if was a man, you would have think twice before you raise your hand on a woman. It ain't macho to get on, so I say no, I say no, I say no, no way. That was the hook line in it. It was where the backups were singing that, and I was saying things like, to hit a woman, because behind us we had things portraying women being cut up, chopped up, and they look battered and bruised. Incidents we had in Grenada.
Gender-based violence is violence that's directed against a person because of an expectation about their role and the behaviours that are to be associated with that role. This is also manifest at the level of the household. So when we have cultural values which both women and men adhere to and perpetuate, which speak to men being the decision makers, the leaders, men having the last say, what it says about women's role and women's place is that women are still secondary citizens. We're not equal decision makers, we're not on equal partnership, we don't negotiate decisions on equal terms. It is possible for us to extend an understanding of gender-based violence to not just violence against women and girls, but violence that is also experienced by boys and men, and also members of the lesbian, gay, transgendered community. So the murder of lesbian, gay and transgendered persons, physical attacks and assaults are also gender-based violence.
Unfortunately, it's disproportionately done towards women and girls. So we find the largest portion of gender-based violence being perpetrated against women and girls in our society.
It has several faces, or you can safely say several forms. It can be either physical, it can be psychological, it can be sexual, it can also be verbal and also economical.
A lot of people think of rape or sexual assault as gender-based violence, but it's way more than that. While that is included, we also have physical assault where a person is beaten up, bitten, stabbed, that sort of thing. We have psychological abuse where a person could be told very horrible things about themselves, be controlled by a partner. In our society, we see it in different forms, and we see it perpetrated against very young girls who are sometimes molested by older men. We see it in our youth, we see it happening to working age women, and we also see it in the elderly.
When there are incidents of violence, unless it is extreme and ending up in the form of murder, sometimes it doesn't even shock my conscience because persons have become so accustomed to seeing violence taking place around them.
When we look at some studies, they say specifically that there are some root causes, cultural beliefs, practices, and expectations in any given culture. There are clearly defined roles of what a man should do, what a man should not do, how a man should dress, how a man should not dress, how a woman should dress, how a woman should not dress, things that she should do or should not do, especially when in the public spaces. And so when we deviate from those cultural norms and practices, persons are targeted.
Violence against women cuts across all classes and all groups. Because you see, at the root of this is an issue of imbalance of power between males and females. And that imbalance of power may manifest itself in different ways at different levels of society. But that is what women face very often. So this issue of power and how men can begin to accept that women have the same rights as they have to protect themselves is at the essence.
The United Nations Entity for Gender Equality and the Empowerment of Women focuses on addressing gender inequalities and as such addressing gender-based discrimination. We see this manifest in Caribbean societies in terms of women having less participation in politics, for example, and decision-making at many levels of society, in the private sector as well. We also see it manifest in differentials in wages for women, for example, for the same work in terms of labor force participation. We very much have a notion of male headship, that men are heads of households, men are decision makers, men are leaders. But the most severe form of gender-based discrimination that we see not only in the Caribbean but globally is violence against women and girls. It's important for us to view violence as a continuum. So in instances when we hear, for example, reports in the news of a woman being murdered by her partner, what is at the backdrop of that is a history of many other forms of violence. So emotional, psychological violence, violence that involves withholding finances, for example, is part of that continuum. The end point being the murder, which is the most severe expression of that violence. Based on research that has been done, globally we see our statistics tell us that 1 in 3 women in their lifetime will experience physical or sexual violence, mostly by an intimate partner. The statistics also tell us that in 2012, 1 in 2 women globally were killed by an intimate partner or family member. When we compare this statistic with men, we see that it was 1 in 20 men that were murdered in similar circumstances. Countries in the Caribbean among the highest in terms of rates of rape in the world. We have exceptionally high rates of sexual violence, of physical violence against women and girls. All our countries in the Caribbean have signed on to human rights instruments that speak to addressing and eliminating gender-based discrimination. And it is within that context that UN Women works to address the harmful cultural norms, values, attitudes, and behaviors associated with how we define ourselves as women and men, which perpetuate violence and other harmful practices.
You better act like a man. You better act like a man. You better act like a man. You better. My daddy, he says, you know, big boys don't cry. My big brother Junior tried to explain why. He said, in this life, you've got to be rough and tough. Ain't no woman gonna love you. If you were soft, you better act like a man. My homies, they teach me the craftsmanship of how to maintain a relationship. They say, you better never let girls know you love them, because they will mess up your whole system. You must always have 1 or 2 on the side. And from the main one, those on the side you must hide. You better act like a man.
While the face of gender-based violence in the Caribbean is a feminine face, because women are predominantly the victims of gender-based violence. Not to say that men are not. We also have men who are victims of domestic violence and so on. So the face is predominantly female. And as a result of that, people think, well, it's a woman's problem. Well, it is not a woman's problem, because the perpetrators are largely men. So men are a huge part of the problem. In Caribbean, we firmly believe that because men are such a large part of the problem, men must be a part of the solution. And this is why we create all these spaces at the regional level, at the community level within the countries, where we engage men in a conversation about behaviors, in a conversation about actions, in a conversation about motives for behaviors and actions, and in a conversation about solutions, the problems, the consequences that flow from these actions and these thoughts and these behaviors of men, and what are the solutions to these.
And males more so have been ascribed certain gender roles. One of the main ones that I think is very destructive is not to be emotional, not to cry, not to shed tears, not to be emotionally expressive. When we are not allowed as human beings to be emotionally expressive and learn how not only to express ourselves, but how to express ourselves in a manner that will actually allow our psycho-emotional state to heal and transform and be processed in a positive manner, it leads to a lot of stress and a lot of frustration and a lot of displacement of feelings, particularly those of resentment, of anger, of frustration. And you see it on children when they want to cry and they're told, "What are you crying for? Be a man. Boys don't cry. You a girl or what?" You know, and then you also start to ascribe these feminine attributes in a negative manner, whereas males do have feminine attributes. Well, what society would ascribe as feminine attributes, which are actually human attributes.
If we rethink masculinity, we unlearn traditional masculinity. We reject the false entitlement. Man's supposed to be the head of the household. Man is boss. Don't let them see you sweat. Big boys don't cry. Then we become healthier. So we have a healthier society. There's a saying, they say that it takes a village to raise a child. The original saying is it takes a healthy village to raise a child. Healthier men means healthier families, a healthier society, a cut down on violence.
Change around gender-based violence is incremental. You know, it's not going to be an overnight, wave your magical wand. You're talking about, again, shifting attitudes. That takes a little bit of time, and that then has to impact on behavior, and behavioral change takes even longer.
For a number of years, the Bureau has had a close relationship with UN Women in terms of providing technical support, grant funding, in terms of training, capacity building of staff as well too. This partnership is very important in terms of leveraging our support and in terms of creating that link with other international agencies. So through UN Women, we've developed partnerships with UNFPA, the Office of the High Commission on Human Rights. We've been able to accomplish much through the partnership. Recently, in 2014, we had an updated National Gender Advisory Policy, which was through grant funding from UN Women, and they provided the expertise all throughout the process as well.
We have been associated with UN Women for a number of years. When we responded to the calls for a proposal, we weren't sure if ours will be accepted because it's the first time we were writing a proposal to such an esteemed organization that has such very high standards. And we were very, very pleased when our proposal was seen as favorable and accepted. But they didn't just leave it there. They had workshops where they built our capacity to say, well, look, we want to give you this grant. These are the guidelines we want you to follow. And they took us through a step-by-step training in preparation so that when we have our activities, these would be your outcomes, these would be your outputs, these will be your different activities. And so they have given us technical support all the way.
UN Women has been a tremendous partner. I mean, when you think about it, this is the work that Legal Aid does on a regular basis. And the support that we had from UN Women really caused us to make this thing go national in a way that, we didn't even imagine. I mean, we do this, we have our clinic, it's running on a daily basis, but the ability for staff members to go out could have only happened because of the support that we got from UN Women. So it's not just the persons who are walking through our doors, but we're able to go into the communities and carry that message with us. And it only could have happened because of the funding that we got from them. And not only just the funding, but also the technical support. I mean, we have persons like Gabrielle who's hands-on and is able to create opportunities for training and strengthening our capacity to do some of those workshops and engagements. A lot of times when you think about a workshop, you think about, a lecture or someone coming and share knowledge, and that's not the approach that we take with our gender-based violence work. And it is informed a lot by, some of the methodologies that were introduced to us from UN Women, where we have that, engagement, that conversation kind of style, and even some of the activities. One of the activities that I use with a particular group, the Girl Guides group, which are very dynamic girls, teenagers, And more we were able to, talk about, the kind of planet that we wanted to see. And we were able to, use the activity, borrowed it from one of the trainings that we did with UN Women. And the girls, they left talking about, being able to vision that kind and really have a clear understanding of the impact of when we deprive persons of their human right, and when we take away that safety that oftentimes is in relationship with gender-based violence.
As a gender advocate, I do training and facilitation on issues that center around gender-based violence, human rights, stigma and discrimination reduction. I also present on these issues and even advocate for policy change that will promote the advancement of women politically, economically, and socially, but also promote equality for all people.
I did a workshop and a training in Grenada with other Caribbean artists from the region that was hosted by UN Women and conducted by staff of UN Women. And that widened the network, and we did some work together. So it's about the whole thing of building community and having people who think alike and who are in my field of work. UN Women has a perspective in terms of the workshops they do, the information they give on gender. Their analysis is so profound that it informs the work. So I understand it better, I become more articulate, I've included it in my work more, and I can talk to young people or even adults when I work with them on the issues from a perspective of what I learned. It informs my work.
So the workshops and all of the training would have shown us how we respect each and every person, no matter what sex you may call yourself or belong to, no matter what gender or sexuality you may associate yourself with.
Yeah, the training for gender advocacy at the UN Women has really helped me first of all as an artist, activist, and a facilitator with the Arts and Action. It has really helped me to understand how far and entrenched the problem of violence against women and gender-based violence is within our society, and basic things in terms of how gender is constructed within society has helped me to really see those areas and sometimes areas where sometimes we take for granted and look over. It made me sensitive to what is involved in the content of what we put out. There's always a kind of gender sensitivity in the work that we do and the work that we shape now as a little different from what was there in the past.
What are you talking about stalking? What's stalking?
It may not be for a session that is focused specifically on violence against women, but maybe something on employee training. And if it applies, and once we see that what the client is asking us to do in order to address these issues has a gender issue in it, we take that opportunity as well, and we inform the client, well, listen, this is also a gender issue that we would like to highlight, and we'll facilitate it.
Words get hurt, words get heal. What you say, another will feel.
UN Women takes a comprehensive and strategic approach to addressing violence against women and girls. We also focus quite a lot on prevention work. And when we talk about prevention, we mean addressing the kinds of values, attitudes, norms, behaviors which lie at the root of gender-based violence. One of the key elements of this prevention work is about working with cultural actors, cultural ambassadors, who have the ability to inform, to influence, to define and redefine how we as Caribbean people define ourselves.
I build your dreams, show you what caring means. Through the thick and thin, love will always win.
Mutual respect and admiration, friendship, love, appreciation, share all over the world. Let's do this together.
We see this in how our culture is expressed, in our music, in our dance, in the way we express ourselves. So if we do want to influence the way people think, people behave, the cultural mechanisms, art forms are critical and essential in how we do that.
I am Roger Williams and I am a teacher, drama in education theatre arts at the Happy Hill Secondary School in Grenada. I became a gender advocate because I saw the need for creating a voice for the voiceless.
This is the last time you leave this house.
When I say the voiceless, it's not necessarily voiceless people who cannot speak, but people who need an extra push as somebody who can go out there and represent them, or those who may not even have the time to go out and speak out. But I've used my skills in drama, in education, to help highlight some of the prevalent issues in society and throughout the Caribbean.
And you would not stop me from exercising my rights as a woman.
Exercise? Exercise? You're not going to notch it. This is the last time you leave this house.
Yes, you must treat me.
As an artist, I see how everything is very closely connected, and so I have always tried to bring those connections out in my work. I think that art does govern the art forms, these different art forms. They govern exactly how people feel all the time. That's why it's important not necessarily to tell me as an artist what to do, how to create something, but if I am sensitized and I understand just exactly what gender-based violence is, and I see how the kind of effect it's going to have on society, then as an artist, eventually it's going to come through in the work in some form or the other because of how important it is. If something is really important to me, then there's this kind of fire and I just have to create based on that thing. So it's a matter of getting the artist to see just how important and how it should be that for us.
What is community mobilization? Community mobilization is a process whereby persons living in a given space receive knowledge and information which empowers them, firstly, to identify what is violence. Secondly, to identify and differentiate the different types of violence. Also to know when we say gender-based violence, what is it we are talking about? How does the gender-based violence affect persons in the home and in the community? The advocates in St. George's Parish, they will be having a town hall meeting. A town hall meeting is where you with the bell crier, you call in all and sundry, hear ye, come let's sit and talk. And let's talk a little more about what is gender-based violence, what does it mean to us, what does it look like, and how can we as a community learn to prevent it, and if it does occur, how do we respond to it in a systematic and timely manner.
In that social mobilization project, we are engaging young people primarily to look at how gender-based violence affects them, how they can act to prevent it in their lives and to respond should it happen. We are engaging them through social media. We have a Facebook page and we encourage them to post and so on the page. We also meet as in-school youth and out-of-school youth on a program that we call the School Tour, where we go to the different schools and different spaces where they're at to share information about gender-based violence, including healthy relationships and the myths and beliefs that can actually cause us to tolerate the problem of gender-based violence. We also have a program called the I Rep Nonviolence campaign, where we go to marketplaces and different community forums and centers where many people gather, where we give information out, we encourage them to participate in quizzes and so on. One of the other things that we do is that we work with the groups that young people belong to, such as the Girl Guides Association and the Scouts Association, the 4-H, and we work with the leaders of those groups and encourage them to have further discussion with their members, and when necessary, invite us to support them in that process.
Legal Aid and Counseling Clinic is a non-governmental organization. We multidisciplinary clinic, so we offer both legal assistance, legal representation, as well as legal advice. But then we have a very strong psychoeducational mandate as well. We started the Social Mobilization Project in 2014. And under that project, and it was a project we were really excited about doing because it really dovetails so well with the work that we were already doing at the Legal Aid and Counseling Clinic. Under that project, we have the responsibility really for offering 6 psychoeducational cycles of a program, 3 for girls, 3 for boys. Our other really big initiative under the Social Mobilization Project was our public education workshops. And those were designed to have much broader reach. We went into so many different communities, geographical communities, some of them rural, as well as communities that were not defined by geography. So we went into churches, we went into some of the schools, we had sessions with the trade unions, we had some sessions with PTAs, such diverse groups.
In Dominica, our statistics tells us that more than 82% of the persons who report any form of gender-based violence are women and girls. The statistics also tells us that at least 56% of the girls, young persons under the age of 16, because our age of consent is 16, have been sexually abused. So these statistics, considering our small population size, is very alarming. We also note that as it relates to the children, sexual abuse is perpetrated by someone within the home. As part of the calendar of activities of the Bureau of Gender Affairs, we are observing 16 days of activism, also as part of a wider campaign, which is the social mobilization campaign against gender-based violence, funded by UN Women. So we decided to target the Kalinago territory in particular, to come here, engage the young people in something that is very informative but yet engaging. So the social mobilization campaign, it surrounds advocacy and awareness raising. The primary objective is to increase Dominicans' awareness of the issue so that we can have policy and social change. The social mobilization campaign is very inclusive in that it targets persons from all walks of life. We have schools involved, we have community groups involved, we have church leaders involved, health workers. These activities offer sort of full coverage because at times we have opportunities where we converge communities together or it may be specific targeted communities. What I can say though is that when we started the social mobilization campaign last year, and I mean we've not conducted any impact assessment. However, we've noticed that there's more dialogue, the dimensions of gender-based violence. So for instance, this year, March 8th, when we celebrated International Women's Day, this day had the most public participation because we call on the public to recognize the contribution of women, and we sort of brought in the idea of joining the fight against gender-based violence. So we had a lot of public participations. So we noticed that there's quite a bit more dialogue from the time we started the social mobilization campaign. Even recently, we just had our Sexual Offences Act amended, which has a number of implications for women and girls. So I think we're making an impact. We're making an impact through the social mobilization campaign.
Our vision at UN Women is that women and men come to an understanding that gender equality benefits both women and men. Oftentimes there is a misunderstanding which results in quite a lot of resistance that promoting gender equality is about prioritizing or empowering women to the detriment of men. That female empowerment, that female advancement means that men lose something.
That everybody should feel that their rights are intact. Everybody should have access to certain kinds of systems and services and that kind of thing, and despite it, whether or not they're male or female or whatever.
I'm a father of 4. I'm a grandfather of 3. I want a better world for my grandchildren.
A society that is more equitable, in which both women and men can have freedom to live their lives and to fill their potential, dreams, ambitions equally, is a society that benefits both women and men.